you for joining us today. This is David Moore of Equity Advantage and IRA Advantage, and today's webinar is on 5 ways your retirement account can be used as the bridge to your future. So first thing, a little housekeeping. If you are a real estate broker looking for CE, especially in Oregon, please let us know, forward your brokerage information, and we'll make sure to get you CE certificates issued. If you are a real estate professional in another state and you would like CE, please contact us and we'll reach out to state, see what requirements are needed to give you the CE that you've earned as well. But I always like to say here at the Advantage Companies, we provide little nuggets of knowledge. So if you get out of this presentation in the next hour, hopefully you'll have a few different nuggets of knowledge, but if you get one, hopefully it's worth your time. And I just also, we need to talk about, since Equity Advantage is a 1031 exchange company, we need to talk about what's happened with the extensions of Section 1031 as well. So without further ado, once again, 5 ways your retirement account can be used as a bridge to your future. And here we go. So, yay, an exchange extension for 1031s. We were finally issued an extension. Notice 2020-23 provided extensions for people that were affected by the coronavirus, and we've got a date range of transactions that it applies to. So here's a few practice tips for you, extension practice tips. Number one, I want to say it's an optional extension, so you're not mandated to take it. And what's really important for people in that scenario is to understand is that if we go back to the exchange world 15, 20 years ago, if somebody wanted to terminate a transaction, we just give them their money and figured, hey, the government would be happy to receive that tax revenue. Well, probably the early 2000s, we got some guidance, and the federal government mandated that anybody that does not follow what's called the 1031 G6 rules would have not only the exchange invalidated, but that company's procedures would be invalidated. So anybody that handles exchanges for a living these days is not going to allow money to be received by a taxpayer outside what's called the 1031 G6 rules, which in a nutshell say you cannot receive the money until you've received all property you have the right to. And how that is impacted by this extension and why it's really important that it's considered optional is, imagine if your 45 days does get an extension due to this situation, and you didn't want that extension. So you want to get your money out, and you're impacted by this thing. Well, you still have the right to do it. If your 45 days has passed, it doesn't automatically get extended to that July 15th date. So another scenario might apply to you if an exchanger's 45-day ID period is extended July 15th. The 180th day is not also extended beyond the initial timelines. We've got, if an exchanger's 180th day deadline is extended to July 15th, the initial 45-day ID period is not impacted. The exchanger must close on ID'd property to complete the transaction. And then, finally, if an exchanger is not impacted, if their 45 and 180-day deadline falls before April 1st or after July 15th, you would not be receiving any extensions there. If you've got questions, further questions on this, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we are getting information out as fast as we receive it. But like I said, we are looking for further clarification, and the industry, especially the Federation Exchange Consummators, is reaching and trying to get more information out there. I'm going to interrupt this 1 second. I've got some people in here to help me. I need a battery charger, so my power plug. I'm going to run out of juice before this thing's over, and I don't want that to happen. So here we go. And so, we've been through this before, and like the old saying goes, deja vu all over again. And we've got articles, our company's background goes back to the mid-'80s, the exchange company. And, so we had articles written from that company. Equity Advantage was started in '91, but we've got stuff from the early '80s actually talking about recessions and what happens in those scenarios. So we've actually gone through this thing a few different times, and it's really sort of entertaining to me, because when we go into a time like we're in, I'll pull out some of our old recession investing articles, start putting them out. And when we were in that 06, 07 period, I actually gave a presentation on recession investing and put that information out. I actually had people in the audience mad at me that I was implying we're going into a recessionary period. So I actually went back and said, well, hypothetically speaking, if this were to happen, this is what we look at. And I think we're sort of in the same situation now. We don't know what's going to happen going forward with this economy and with recovery. But I think it's fair to put out there that we are looking at, working on recession investing. So typically when we look at a slowdown, what are the characteristics of recession? Cash is king. Loans are hard to find. Salary increases are smaller. Businesses will not expand to fill vacant space. It's a buyer's market. But the other thing, I guess the first thing that we're seeing, so we talked about extensions of 1031, but the biggest impact we're seeing right now is we had a situation where the Fed drops interest rates by 1.5 points, and all of a sudden our borrowing rates have gone up 2 points. That's problematic, obviously, but the biggest issue we've got in the exchange world right now is that now there's all these requirements on certain loans where you might have to impound a year's principal payments. And how do you do that? If you don't have money in a bank account someplace else, you want to use exchange funds to do that, you're going to have a problem. That money typically is going to be looked at as taxable boot. And so it's one of those things where we're working forward, trying to figure out exactly how best to do it. Our sort of practice tip on that scenario is if you've got a situation where you're trying to work forward, you have that impound occur, the money comes out. Our position is, hopefully the IRS is reasonable in this, but you're going to talk to your tax people sometime before April 15th, right? Don't do it the 14th. Make sure you got it going on earlier, but you want to let them know what's going on. And if when that money is released in the future, that impound, if you put it back into the property, with a equity increase, a debt pay down, then at least you're in the spirit of what's happened there. And we can only hope that the federal government's going to acknowledge your effort and not punish you for it. But that's probably our biggest problem right now with things slowing down. And that's one of those issues that this presentation's all about. If we got to get a deal done, how do we get it done? What else do we have out there? What have we been told over and over again we can't use, and yet we can? So that's why we come back to that title and how we're going to use our retirement account to move forward. And unlike a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, now we've got, with IRA Advantage, we've got experience working through these times, and we've got actual case studies that we've done and things that we did previously that we know work and we can use going forward. So hopefully you're going to get some real benefit out of this. And with adversity comes opportunity. So you've just got to look at those situations and what you're going to do moving forward. Give yourself a place to go. And we joke on our recession investing information. It says some brokers just move to Hawaii until the recession's over, come back in. But like I said, anytime we've got changes, we've got opportunities. So you've got to look at what's going on, and keep in mind cash is king. So if you don't have the cash in the bank, what's another source of cash? Maybe it is your retirement account. So we hope we're going to give you some good solutions that are going to take care of you, and if you're a professional in the real estate field, maybe your client situations too. But like I always say in presentations, the only dumb question is the one that's not asked. So if you've got questions, we will be addressing some of them at the end of this presentation. But if you've got a situation that you want to go over, I think the best way to do it, the millennials love to text things and love to hide behind a cursor. But the bottom line is, if you give us a phone call, it's very easy to get to the bottom line on something quickly, and we can go back and forth all day with texts and emails and not get to the root of the issue. So why real estate? And I always joke, I'm in the business selling real estate to real estate professionals so often. And I'm a real estate guy. I love real estate. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan, even though we work with retirement accounts, and that's one of our businesses with IRA Advantage. I'm not a huge fan of them because I feel like you get money in there and I hate the word traditional, but in a traditional IRA sense or 401k sense, what are your investment options? And it's pretty much Wall Street. And if you look at diversification, anytime you look at diversification, any investment advisor is going to say diversify is good. You want to diversify your investments just for safety purposes. Well, what percent of retirement accounts do you think is in real estate? No, it's 2% or less. So does that sound like diversification? I don't really think so. And of that 2%, a lot of that is REITs, real estate investment trusts. So when we talk about buying real estate, it's something that I really want to stress. We're talking about buying real estate that gives you the benefits and burdens of owning real estate, which on this slide we can see you've got cash flow, leverage, interest deductions, mortgage pay down, depreciation, appreciation. The bottom line is a property does not have to go up in value to give you a return. Even if you go buy gold, let's say, and what is gold? What's real estate for that matter? I mean, anytime we're looking at anything that is not sold on Wall Street is considered an alternative investment. I don't really call them alternative investments, and I think that's not descriptive at all. I would say that real estate and precious metal, any tangible asset for that matter, is a real investment, and they're the oldest, most secure investments in the history of mankind. So when you look at real estate, if you buy it and you've got a tenant in it, somebody's paying things. If you got leverage, they're going to be taking care of the debt service. You're going to have the cash flow, even if you never have that appreciation. I was taught never to bank on appreciation, and you don't have to with real estate. If you go back to metal, let's say gold, what has to happen? You're still betting that it goes up in value. So, I love real estate for all the reasons that are listed on this page and more. But, if you look at real estate and you look at money pulled out of your pocket, the bottom line is it's a great deal. You buy it, you hold it. When it comes time to dispose of it, you can do an exchange. You get the choice of paying the tax. So when we're talking about a retirement account, we've got a lot of situations where people used to, maybe there was one professional in the retirement world that used to say, well, why would you do an exchange when you could just use an IRA for this? They're apples and oranges, two totally different things. Now, with that said, we can actually combine an IRA investment and a 1031 investment into a common asset. So they are not mutually exclusive. So we can blur lines back and forth. And once again, if you've got an idea, you've got a question, please don't hesitate to reach out. So what's the mystery? What's the big deal with a self-directed IRA? Since we're talking about solving problems with retirement accounts, typically the root of this solution is going to be an IRA, or maybe it's a 401k plan. And with this with this COVID situation, we've got the CARE Act, which actually gave you some access to 401k funds. You can take up to 100k for 3 years, and that's something that's unusual, right? To be able to have access to money just to take care of situations. Now, I really think it's sort of a trap, because what's going to happen with 100k? It's going to come out, you're going to spend it, and then you're going to be treated, it's going to be gone, and you're going to have a tax consequence. If it's not put back in that timeline, it's going to be treated as distribution, trigger tax consequences for you. So if you're going to do that, please be careful. Please set aside the tax consequence. At least keep it safe so that you're not having to come out of pocket 3 years from now when that thing has to be taken care of. But if we look at, the base of this whole process, a self-directed IRA is not a legally defined term. It's just a term that describes an account that allows you to go do what you want to do. And in the most basic sense, all we're doing is moving funds from a custodian that won't allow you to do what you want to do to one that does. So, and obviously what you want to do is within some limits, but that's really what we're talking about. If we're talking about 401k plans, we're really looking at a 401k plan and what it currently is. If you've got a 401k plan and you want to go do something that is not offered within that plan, well, I shouldn't say that, but maybe the plan allows you to do something you've been told you can't. I've had many transactions through the years where I've been told by the taxpayer, who was told by their trustee or administrator on the 401k plan they couldn't do something. And when I got the plan and reviewed the plan, I found that they could. And then even at that point, I had to argue with the administrator or trustee about what was possible. So never really go, on face value of somebody's comment. Take a look at what you've got. Now, if the 401k plan does not allow you to do what you want to do, first question, can we amend the plan to allow it? If we can't amend the plan to allow it, we replace the plan. But once again, in this situation, we've got some relief there. And you've got the ability, once again, if we look back to the last collapse, we had lots of people losing their jobs. Now, that's a horrible thing, and nobody's going to say it's not. But if we look at the silver lining of the whole thing, you now have access to the 401k plan. So when we're looking at created self-directed account, any IRA can be self-directed. We're looking at 401k plans. We've got a situation where, any corporate sponsored plan, you can't get access to money in a normal period of time until you're 59 and a half years old. You can take an in-service distribution, or if it's a previous employer plan, we can use that money. But we've had people, to show the extreme of this situation, we've actually had people quit their jobs to get access to money when they were needing to. And I'll tell you how crazy it actually is. We've got people that have actually gone to the extreme of getting divorced. And part of the divorce decree was splitting up that 401k asset, which gave them access. So, I'm going to tell you, this is a situation where if you've lost your job, that 401k plan can be rolled into self-directed IRA, can be put, let's say we could even do a rollover business startup for you. So during that last crash, we did a lot of those, got people into a situation where maybe they'd always dreamed of having their own business, never had it, and they hadn't had the money, but that 401k plan now provides the source of funds to go create a new life. So we will talk further about that in a little while. So once again, we look at self-directed retirement accounts, a 401k plan, current employer plan. If you're under 59 and a half, you're pretty much stuck in there unless you want to quit or get divorced. But all joking aside, that's the reality of it. If you've been laid off and you're now without a job and you have a 401k plan, we can move that plan into either a new solo 401k plan if you're going to start a business, or we could do a rollover business startup, which literally allows you to create a business and work for it. So we've got options there, and give us a call. We'll be happy to go over all those options and fit the process and the vehicle to your scenario. So why do it today? We've pretty much talked about this page already. Maybe it's a situation where it's the life raft to your future. Maybe you're quitting or changing jobs, or you've been laid off. You've got access to that money, and that's going to be the change. So really what this slide's talking about is, the opportunity today is you've got a situation where lots of people are sitting at home trying to figure out what they're going to do going forward. And this might be a solution to give you that opportunity go do what you want to do. When we look at a retirement account, we really look at two basic things. If I'm talking about an exchange, for those of you in the audience that do tax deferred exchanges, I like simple. So I break it down into four basic situations with an exchange. One, it's got to be an exchange. Two, what's given received have to be of like kind. Three, you need to go across or up in value and equity. And finally, we've got to have continuity of vesting. Now, in a retirement account, we've only got two real issues. One, what do you want to invest in? And two, who are you transacting between or for the benefit of? So the way the law works in retirement accounts, if it's not specifically prohibited, it's therefore allowed. An IRA can literally buy anything other than collectibles, life insurance contracts, or stock in a sub-S corporation. 401k plans, the only limitation is collectibles. So it's really broad that way. So rarely is an investment a problem. What triggers problems typically for people is transactions between or for the benefit of a disqualified party. So your next question is, well, who's a disqualified party to a plan? Well, if it's your plan, you are. Let's say you have a traditional and a Roth. Well, each of those plans would be disqualified parties to one another. Your spouse is a disqualified party to your plan. Parents, grandparents, kids, grandkids, their spouses, or any legal entity owned in a controlling interest by one of those are all considered disqualified parties. And any transaction that benefited one of those would be considered a prohibited transaction. All right. Now, what's interesting is you can't transact between or for the benefit of disqualified party, but you can transact along with one. So what do I mean by that? Now, let's say you want more money to go buy an asset. Well, you can take your retirement account, and it can be an owner, and you can be a co-owner of that asset, whether it's property or whatever other investment it might be. Now, if we're talking about real estate investments, you could be either a tenancy in common owner, or you could be a common member of an LLC. So if we're looking at this joint ownership with your IRA in a real estate transaction, think about it this way: there's never a perfect way to do things. So I like the LLC structure for owning real estate. If we contain, if that LLC has as its members, let's say if we're talking in the IRA space, the trust company for benefit of your IRA, we could have an LLC that has that trust company for benefit of your IRA as a member, and you could be personally a member of that LLC as well. Now that structure is nice because just the LLC is then going to make every investment, everything just goes in and out of that LLC account. The downside of that structure is that at the end of the day, you personally are going to have tax exposure on disposition. If it's a non-leveraged investment, your retirement account won't. So you personally might want to do an exchange where the retirement account doesn't need to. And in that scenario, we'd have to do an exchange for the LLC, which may or may not be what you want to do. And it also keeps the money going forward together. The other problem with the LLC structure is that once we create that limited liability and let's say fund that limited liability with funds from both you personally and the other side, we've got a situation where we are having, sorry, I got distracted a little bit. That said low bandwidth. I hope nobody's seeing a jerky image out there. But if we're looking at a situation where it's tenancy in common, I like it because the LLC structure, after the initial investment in the LLC by the two disqualified parties, we cannot have additional money come in. So let's say you want to make an additional contribution to that LLC via you personally or the retirement account. Any future transaction with that LLC would be considered a prohibited transaction. So we've really got that entity after it's been the initial funding, it's a static entity. The tenancy in common structure allows one, the ability upon disposition for you personally to do an exchange, and once again the retirement account doesn't need to, but two, it allows you to have more money go into a transaction, because anybody out there that's got investment properties understands once in a while things happen. Maybe a tenant beats up a property, maybe you've got a disaster, some hailstorm goes and blows out your roofs, and now you've got a need for a whole bunch of money there. And how do you fix that? So I guess the alternate, if we've got an LLC, we'd have to create another limited liability company and have money thrown in that way, but everything gets complicated. And I just think that tenancy in common structure is very nice because, once again, it allows joint ownership. The tenancy in common, you need to have a TIC agreement, tenancy in common agreement, spelling out how that property is going to work. And that TIC agreement needs to be IRA specific, IRA 401k specific. But that would also allow, upon disposition, you personally to do an exchange, and the retirement account can do whatever it wants to do. But the big thing here, once again, is to state that you can have joint ownership of a property or some other investment, and it's just a question of how you want to structure that, what's going to work best in your scenario. But on the bright side, you can definitely do it. So we talked about investing together, and we talked about the ability to do something called that rollover business startup. So rollover business startup, we can use for real estate investment. We put real estate investment companies together using the structure. We've done everything from mining operations, gold, silver, palladium mine. We've done Alaskan fishing operations. We've done car dealerships, mattress companies, lots of real estate investment companies. But the rollover business startup process allows you literally to create a new company that you're employed by using your retirement funds. And what happens is we are going to move the funds into we're going to create a new 401k plan. We're going to create a new C corporation. Your retirement money moves into the new 401k plan. It's sort of chicken or egg deal. It's sort of a funny situation. But how's the plan exist without the corp, and how's the corp exist without the plan? But the plan gets funded. The plan then makes the investment in the corporation. We require our client, our taxpayer, to put in 5%. We do that for a variety of reasons. If you're interested in doing this, you can give us a call. We'll go through that. But once again, we'd like to see at least a 5% interest in this thing. And the balance of the funds can be your retirement account. The plan, money moves into the plan buys the corp then buys the business. If we're talking real estate, you've just got a C corporation that's making the investments. You're working as an employee of that corporation. You've just got a life raft to the future. So that's an extreme example going to the real estate situation. But let's say you've got a business and you've got a major problem there. This is intended to be a business startup situation. We can't just take your money and put it into your existing business, but we could create a new one. So let's say you've got a business, it needs help, and the only source of funds you've got access to is your retirement account. We just have to create a new C corporation. You personally would contribute the business. You need to have an appraisal of the business, get a good valuation of it so that it's defendable, so nobody's going to attack you on it. And so you're going to contribute to that business, receive shares attributable to the value of that business, and then simultaneously the retirement accounts making the investment in that the new corporation. And now there you go. You've got the funds, you've got access to it. So, never say die. Look at the situation and ask the questions. But this situation really works well for people. They're looking for a place to go. The franchise world understands this. They'll even talk about some of the banks understand what's going on, and they'll actually give you SBA loans in addition to this stuff. But just keep in mind the rollover business startup is a great solution for people that are in dire straits, or maybe somebody that's just looking for that opportunity to go forward in a brighter future. They've always looked at that opportunity to get a business, and they finally have this opportunity. So it's a silver lining if you've got access to a 401k plan that you didn't think you'd have access to until you're 59 and a half. We've got a few different solutions here we're going to talk about, and they're going to be things that these actually have been done. They're not hypothetical situations. I say that, and then I guess actually the CARES Act thing is sort of a hypothetical because we haven't we're just getting started with it. But the idea is we've got a situation, and this slide does talk about something we have done for many years. When we do a reverse exchange, the biggest issue with a reverse exchange is, do you have the money to go buy something? Do you have the money to make this purchase happen before you have the proceeds from that sale going forward? And we've had lots of people through the years that we've got something in the retirement world called a 60-day rollover. If you've got retirement funds, you can do that once a year. And so we've had situations where we've self-directed retirement accounts for people, and then they call us up, they're wanting to do a reverse exchange, and they're asking for sources of funds. Well, a lot of times we'll just say, okay, let's get access to that money, take that 60-day rollover, you go buy the property. When your property sells, the money comes back in. You obviously only have a 60-day timeline. So my advice anytime we're looking at reverse exchange is, I guess, don't do it if you don't have to. So I really encourage people to ask for the time they need. And if we run out of that time, whether it's time on the acquisition or time on the disposition, whatever property is being acquired, if a property is being acquired first, ask for whatever period of time you can to make that purchase happen. If we're looking at a situation where we've got both properties in the market, the sale property happens right away, you don't know where you're going, ask for the time once again. But if we've got this rollover, that 60-day rollover, you only have the 60 days. So once again, we're going to look and ask for whatever time we can, and then we use that money, and then we get the money from that sale that comes back in. We use the sale proceeds from the relinquished property to pay back that money from the 60-day rollover. So that is something that we have done many times. We do have the situation now with the CARES Act where, as I mentioned earlier, you've got access to a lot more money for up to 3 years. But once again, make sure you have access to the funds needed to pay the tax consequence if that money stays out of the transaction. Okay, so we got to be careful anytime we've got money that's coming out. Make sure you're going to have a situation where you can get it in without a problem, and that obviously can be problematic. We like to say we talk about opportunities and solutions in here, and this is one of those. This is something that was done the last crash. So, we're in a situation where, think about what land costs today. I mean, if we're looking at, you're looking at me, I'm sitting in Portland. Well, pre-crash anyway, if we go back that short period of time, we had downtown property that just a couple of years ago might have been $250,000. Now it's $500,000 for a piece of dirt. And if we're talking people in New York or San Francisco or LA or Seattle, you're probably saying, well, that's nothing. And maybe it isn't, but that might have gone down. Well, this situation was actually in Bend. Bend's a wonderful, beautiful place to live and just to be. There's so much going on out there. Very active people, just a great lifestyle. Well, since it's such a wonderful place, values go high, and then when we have a crash, they go low because it's a lot of second homes. It's vacation type property, a lot of it, but it's a wonderful place. So we got contacted during the last crash by a builder developer that saw the opportunity to go buy land dirt cheap. Literally dirt cheap. So you look at a situation where there was lots over there that were selling for $750,000 pre-crash, and they couldn't be given away at $70,000. So we had builders say, gee, I want to buy this stuff, but I have no idea when we're going to get out of this. And I think that's what we're sort of sitting looking at today. Will we have a V recovery, U recovery? How long is it going to happen? What is going to happen when people go back to work? And what is happening with the financing? What's going to happen with those values? How do we move forward? And in this situation, this gentleman said, hey, I want to buy this land. I have no idea when I'm going to get started. I can't afford to pay the banks the carrying costs, the insurance, or not the insurance, but the interest to go forward for who knows how long. Could I use my retirement account and use it as a land bank? And the answer is certainly yes. And so what we did in this situation, we did a checkbook IRA for them. And a checkbook IRA, once again, is we're going to create new custodial account with a trust company that allows self-directed investments. We then create an IRA-specific limited liability company. The investment that the trust company makes is in the limited liability company. This is, once again, called a checkbook IRA or an IRA LLC. So as soon as the trust company has made this investment, and this is a manager-managed limited liability company, the member, legally speaking, is going to, read ABC Trust Company, CFBO, custodian for benefit of, IRA number, whatever it might be. And that's going to be the member. It could be multiple accounts. It could be your IRA, it could be yours and a spouse's. It could be it could be your traditional and Roth. It could be any number of things. But when we do that thing, the investment the trust company makes is in the LLC. The LLC has as its manager you, the taxpayer. So you have the power of the pen to go forward. To buy a property, you're just simply making an investment in the LLC's name, and you need earnestment, negotiate from inception in the LLC's name, write check for the earnest money, write check for the down payment, get that thing closed. But in this situation, the gentleman took the checkbook IRA, bought that land. Now, that's great. That works well. The situation, though, is he later wanted to be able to build on it. He wants to develop this stuff. And if he were then to build on that property or develop it, and he wants to, do that work, can he do that? No, that would be a prohibited transaction. So what we did is we created a second limited liability company, and we reduced his ownership of that entity down to 1/6 owner. So if you remember back probably 15 minutes ago, I was talking about disqualified parties, and I mentioned any entity that was owned in controlling interest by a disqualified party would also constitute a disqualified entity and therefore a prohibited transaction. By squeezing them down to 1/6 interest, we no longer have a prohibited transaction to have this occur. And so that's what we did. We created the checkbook IRA LLC. We created a second LLC. His ownership of the second LLC was the development entity, and he was the 1/6 owner, so it therefore no longer constituted a prohibited transaction, and he was able to build on those lots when it came time to build on them. So imagine you're in an exchange and you want to go forward. Well, and what's happening to loans these days? You might have a reduction in loan to value. Something I want to comment on is one of the big fallacies of 1031. And when we're talking about value and equity requirements to go forward in an exchange, you're going to hear lots of people say you have to replace debt in an exchange, and that's entirely untrue. Debt can be reduced in two ways. One, by going down in value, and that triggers tax because you went down in value. The other way debt is reduced is by adding cash. So think back on the last recession. If you were in real estate, what happened to those loans? You had an increase in what was required to get it. You had a decrease in loan to value. And think about what was happening to exchangers in that same period of time. Their properties were reducing in value and therefore reducing in the equity in that thing. So, it was really a recipe for disaster. And we had people contacting us, hey, do I need to pay off the property pre-disposition so I don't have to have debt on the replacement? And that's entirely unnecessary. So once again, you can always add cash to a transaction without tax exposure. But you cannot go down in value without tax exposure. Simple rule to remember is you can offset mortgage boot with additional cash. You cannot offset cash boot with additional mortgage. Just think of it this way. The government never has a problem with you adding money. They just don't want to see you pull it out without tax. And remember this, it doesn't matter what you put into it. You think you're entitled to it. The first money out is going to be old Uncle Sam's. So in this scenario, this is a transaction we worked on, once again, back in the last crash. And we had a gentleman that gave up a large multifamily project, wanted to buy actually a new restaurant, and he was needing more money. It was a bigger deal. So what we did, 1031 prohibits the exchange of a partnership interest. So when we're looking at members of an LLC, if we have a multi-member LLC, that's not something that the entity can do in exchange, but you couldn't take your personal interest out of a multi-member LLC and do an exchange. Now there's something called a drop and swap or a swap and drop. Once again, that's another situation, another seminar you're going to have to sign up for. But that's one of our biggest. If we look at any exchange, time's the biggest issue, vesting's the second biggest, and the vesting issue is simply because of different ownership and structure. So if we look at a 1031, since it prohibits partnership interests, what it requires, if we're going to combine your IRA or 401k funds into the buy side of a 1031, it's going to require a tenancy in common structure. So again, I'm going to stress that you should have a tenancy in common agreement, and that tenancy in common agreement should have IRA 401k specific verbiage in it. But I like that structure. It's going to allow us to get the exchange done, and in the future, upon disposition, it's going to allow each you personally and your plan money to go do what you want to do with each of those separately as you choose. But once again, it's not a problem at all to transact along with a disqualified party. It's a problem to transact between or for the benefit of a disqualified party. So this slide, solution number 4, this is another one that was the last crash. And think about that situation. What we're not seeing yet, and hopefully we won't see, is a continued meltdown and banks closing and everything else. I really, a lot of the regional banks, the banks we love, went away in that last crash, and which hurt us because when we're looking at reverse exchanges, improvement exchanges, those type of transactions, typically the regional banks are the ones that, a portfolio lender, somebody that's going to make those loans and help our people get where they want to go. And in this situation, if we go back, this builder developer had some land. The objective of that investment in land was to ultimately build a multifamily project, a nice nice one, and unfortunately the downturn happened, crash happened. The builder developer was falling behind, and the biggest problem in this particular scenario was not only was the builder developer falling behind, but the bank itself was failing. So if the bank failed, he was going to actually lose everything, and he really didn't want to do that, and honestly couldn't afford to do that. So he came to us and he said, hey, Dad's IRA happened to have a nice chunk of equity in it. It had, maybe $1.5 million in it. And, this gentleman it was about a $3 million property, $1.8 million in equity. And so he had that debt on it, about $1.2 million. So Dad's IRA clearly had enough capital in it to take care of that problem. So what we ended up doing is we did a checkbook IRA or IRA LLC for Dad. And if we just took Dad's money to pay that property off, that would clearly constitute a prohibited transaction. So what we ended up doing is we created a second limited liability company. And just like we talked about in that earlier example, in this situation, what happened is Junior contributed the property. We need a hard value on that thing. So you have to have, let's get an appraisal done. And Junior, he contributed property to the limited liability company, the new limited liability company. He received a membership interest attributable to the equity in that property, the roughly 1.8 million. At the same time he contributed the property, Dad's IRA put the $1.4 million, $1.5 million into that LLC. Now who owns the property? It's not Junior's property anymore. The property is owned by the limited liability company that has both Dad's IRA and Junior's members, but that limited liability company owns the asset and has the cash to pay the asset off, and that's exactly what it did. So that was a situation. That's one example of many that we worked through, and ultimately that property was developed, and it was a joint investment for the two, and when it comes time to turn it, they'll turn it and they'll choose to do whatever they want to do with it. But that's a great example of a solution to take care of somebody's problem, and it really, really works. So we've got this last example here, and it sort of balls up everything. All right, so you've got a situation where we had an older couple came to us, and this wasn't a hardship sort situation. This was just a situation where they really wanted a leg up to go forward. They needed a place to live and a job. I didn't know that at the initial consultation with them, because they simply asked, hey, is it possible to use both of our IRAs to go out and buy this mobile home RV park? And my answer was, yes, certainly you can do that. Not a problem at all. We'll just do a multi-member checkbook IRA LLC. And I guess what I'd like to say at this point before continuing is, if we're looking at that IRA LLC situation and scenario, I talked about when we can definitely combine multiple disqualified parties into a common LLC, and that's not a problem. But additional investments in the LLC by any of those disqualified parties is not okay. So if somebody comes to me and they're in their 50s or 60s maybe, and they want to do this, we're going to do, maybe in their 40s even, we're going to do a single LLC with both accounts as its member. If you're younger, if you call me up in your 20s and you want to do that and you're married, I'm going to do a checkbook IRA LLC for each one of you, because I know you've got many, many years ahead of you that you're going to be making contributions to your retirement account. You probably want to, build up your checkbook IRA as well. So depending on age or what your situation is, making additional contributions, we might do a single checkbook IRA LLC for a husband and wife, or we might do multiple, and it really is just dependent upon whether additional money's coming in. A rollover business startup, we're not talking IRA at all. So what happened in this is we shifted the direction, because their initial comment was, look, we want to go make this investment in the mobile home RV park. We want to use our IRAs to do it. So that checkbook IRA LLC situation would be a perfect scenario, perfect solution for them. What ultimately happened, though, is when they told me, hey, we are not in a situation where we can just do that. We actually want to take ownership of it. We want to manage the asset. We want to be the on-site manager. So we'd like to take compensation. And we'd actually also like to live there, which both those would constitute disqualified, transactions, prohibited transactions with an IRA, and with a 401k plan as well. But by doing the rollover business startup, we actually created the new 401k plan, moved both IRAs into that plan. And just a housekeeping note on that: if it's a beneficiary or Roth funds, we can't move those into that 401k plan. But anything else we should be able to work with. The plan bought the corp bought the park, and they had everything going their way. They got, I just love this story because they got an investment, they got a job, and they got a place to live. So I think that's a great story and a great solution for those people. And it's definitely something that I would expect we're going to be looking at going forward in different scenarios. So with that said, that's our last example. We're going to go through a few things. The next few pages in here are just glossary. I'm not going to cover those when you're home at night. We will be uploading, actually, I apologize, I did not upload this presentation into the handouts. So if you'd like a hard copy of this, please reach out to us. You can reach out to Tina at IRAadvantage.net. Actually, I'm sorry, it's T. Colson, C-O-L-S-O-N at IRAadvantage.net, or admin at IRAadvantage.net, and we'll make sure to get you hard copies of this presentation. And what I was going to say is, if you're having a hard time falling asleep some night, pull it out and it'll put you right to bed. But the glossary is here to help, and we've got a few pages of that in here. And then we're going to finish up with this IRA Investors Checklist. So really this sort of applies to both IRAs and 401k plans. If we're looking at this situation, I want to start off that first one. It says plan ahead. It takes 2 to 4 weeks to put one of these things together. If we talk about IRAs or 401k plans, it's the deal is with a Wall Street IRA or 401k, it's pretty much impossible to create what would be considered a prohibited transaction when you've got a truly self-directed account. And by the way, there's lots of Wall Street firms that offer self-directed accounts, but it's their definition of it. It's something that's going to allow you the ability to buy off their menu of investment options. A truly self-directed account is one that's going to allow you to buy anything the law allows. And I think that's a big difference in definition, and it's something you need to be aware of. So when we're looking at different trust companies, you need to also understand, if you're picking a trust company, how they're going to charge you. And I've got some feelings on that. I really discourage our clients from working with trust companies going to charge based upon the value of the account. And that's really important when it comes to RMDs, required minimum distributions. At the end of the day, you don't want to be adverse to your trust company. You don't want to be arguing with them over what something's worth. During the last crash, we had one unfortunate investor that had $1 million note, with somebody, and that note went south. Well, it hadn't legally gone south yet. He knew it was no good, and he ended up arguing with the trust company over the value of that. They wanted to ding him and say, charge him based upon $1 million value when it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. And so that left a real, sour taste in my mouth. And I really like our clients to be paying for something and they're getting what their values are to be. The other thing is, you want to understand, if you're doing a checkbook IRA, what that trust company is going to require of you. Because some trust companies require the taxpayers, tax or legal people to sign a document stating they're experts all things IRA, which they're probably not going to want to do. Some trust companies won't allow the taxpayer to be the manager of that checkbook IRA LLC, which totally defeats the entire purpose of that entity too. So those are things that just to keep in mind. But there's a bunch of self-direct custodians coast to coast to take care of you in this situation. But the deal is, it takes time to put one of these things together. And if you call us today, it's not going to take the 2 to 4 weeks. Probably it's going to most likely take longer, because everybody in that pipeline is possibly working at home or remotely someplace else. Things just are taking time to get done. And what happens in this scenario, you might find a piece of property that you want to buy, and it's a great opportunity for you, and you want to make that offer before you've got your investment vehicle created, whether it's a solo 401k plan or your IRA. So your natural reaction is, well, hey, most contracts are assignable, so I'm just going to personally tie the thing up, and then I'll sign it over to my plan at a later date. Well, that's not okay. Technically, that constitutes a prohibited transaction. So the idea is, if you scuba dive, anybody that scuba dives has to plan the dive, then they dive the plan, right? If you're a pilot, you file a flight plan. Boats, you file a float plan. You let people know, you know what's going on. You set it up in advance. When we're talking about retirement accounts, what's really interesting to me is, I've been doing exchanges for, several decades. And I rarely have clients come in here on the exchange side. And when we talk about retirement accounts, I have people come in here all the time. I mean, obviously, it's been a few weeks now since we've had people in here, but in a typical day, pre-COVID, post-COVID, we have lots of people with retirement accounts come in, and sometimes it's somebody that we've done exchange work for a long, long time, and I'd never seen them in the exchanges. And they come in with their retirement account. I said, well, I never saw you with the exchanges. Why are you here now? I'm always happy to see everybody. And their response is, well, this is my retirement account, and this is my retirement money. And I really look at anybody's money as that retirement money. If we're talking 1031, it's probably getting them to the future in the same scenario. But people are more cautious with this stuff. And our position is, you want to be very careful. You want to do things right from the very beginning. So, one of the traps is, you find a property, you want to write the offer, your account's not set up, so you tie it up personally. Most contracts are signable, so you want to sign it from you personally, the plan, at a later date. And once again, that constitutes a prohibited transaction. So your next comment, well, why don't I just write it in the custodian's name? Well, yeah, that would be fine, but do you have the power of the pen for the custodian? The answer to that is no. So, it's really important that you get things set up before you start going forward. It's entertaining to me because, we advertise on the radio a lot. We've got all the web stuff, and I'll have somebody contact us. They ask me all these questions. I tell them, it takes time and to be ready. And when do you think I get the call? I get the call when they've got a purchase that's imminent. They got to get it done, and now everything's a push. So, take the time. Don't get stressed. Yesterday I was talking to somebody that has a $1.4 million coming into their retirement account, and it's stressful to get everything taken care of, and it's especially stressful right now when everything's a call and a phone call and a return phone call and everything else. So really be ready for this stuff. Ask the questions. Take the time to be ready. A solution to that earnest money, if you're not set to go, think of this. I talked about disqualified parties and prohibited transactions. What I did not mention, I talked about who is a disqualified party. I didn't talk about those that are not, that might truly surprise you. If we look at a related party transaction in 1031, those related parties are, parents, grandparents, kids, grandkids, spouses, and, entities owning a controlling interest in. If we're talking about retirement accounts, we're talking about disqualified parties, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, they are not disqualified parties. So if you're ready to make a purchase of something or write an offer on something and your account's not set, and you've got a brother or sister that you get along with, let them make the offer. Let them take it, tie it up, and then they can assign it over to you later. So that's a great solution, and that can take care of some of these time-sensitive scenarios. So, the second bullet point. So first is the plan ahead. Second, you can almost. That's a typo. I've got to fix in there. You can invest in make almost any investment with a truly self-directed retirement account. It's really wide open. You can purchase with family members and friends. You cannot purchase for them or from them. You can't loan to or borrow from a disqualified party. You can't buy from or sell to. We always talk about buying a property to retire in. That's entirely possible. You just can't use that property, nor could any other disqualified party use that property until it's taken as a distribution. And I mean that fully taken as a distribution. And while we're talking about taking in-kind distributions, I think one of the things that comes up is one of the objections I hear all the time is, well, what happens since real estate, quote unquote, is not liquid? What happens if you use your retirement account to go buy that property, and now you're in a situation where you've got to take an RMD, a required minimum distribution? You don't have any cash to take it. Well, an easy solution is to simply take pieces of that property as a distribution, or if it's a checkbook IRA, you can just assign membership interests in that entity. And if you do that over a series of years, if you distribute that asset using distributions of a minority interest each time, you got two benefits. One, what's it worth? Two, you can actually discount the value of that. If it's a minority interest, you don't have a controlling interest in the asset. You can actually discount the value of that percentage substantially. Talk to your tax and legal people about that. But that in-kind distribution can actually offer a tremendous opportunity, people. It's not a problem. Now, with everything that's good is bad, you have a situation where you take an in-kind distribution, you're going to be incurring a tax liability without receiving the cash to pay the tax obligation. So where's an easy solution to get that money? Easy solution to get that money is after you've taken the last distribution, and before the taxes are due, do a cash out refinance of the property. You now own the property, the refi money has paid the tax obligation, and there you go. So whether we're talking about an investment that you love and like to personally own, or we're talking about an investment that is going to ultimately become your retirement home, either way, you've got a situation where you can take that entire property in a single distribution, or you can take pieces of it over time. Either way works, whether it's TIC or that membership interest situation. All right. I guess one other scenario we've got, and I'm going to hit your Q&As, is that, I want to just mention, we're really at the end of this presentation, is that another fallacy in the retirement world is you can't leverage an investment with an IRA. Totally untrue. It's just got to be non-recourse IRA 401k compliant debt. And I guess one of the little tips I've got to give you there is, if we're talking a leveraged investment using an IRA, just be aware it's not a reason to do or not to do a given investment. Just be aware that any income or gain attributable to the leverage is going to trigger some tax exposure. So income and gain attributable to the equity is tax deferred, or with the income and gain attributable to leverage, that's going to have tax exposure. Now, what's interesting is a 401k plan that does not apply. So if we're talking a real estate broker putting a plan together for a broker, I'm always going to do a solo 401k if they don't have full-time employees, because that alone, that situation where you've got the tax on leverage does not apply to the 401k where it does with the IRA. So as we said earlier, negotiate from the deal's inception, the IRA or IRA LLC's name. Do not overextend, plan on keeping nice cushions so you've got things to go forward. At this point, if anyone's got any questions, please text them in there on that panel to your right. And otherwise, we are at the end of the presentation. I'd like to mention that we've got our YouTube channels that are there to give you some Corona content. Hopefully they'll take care of some situations, or maybe they'll be that sleep medicine for you. But you can type in Equity Advantage, 1031 exchanges, IRA Advantage, self-directed IRAs. Another thing I want to mention, if you're looking for a place to get more exposure for your properties, for years we had people sending us property information, wanting to get it out to our clients. We don't do that, but we've got our post1031.com website. It's there to take care of those needs. And more than anything, there's nothing other, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. So if you got questions, concerns, you or clients have problems with transactions that are occurring right now, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you're a broker, one last time, please get us your contact information if you're looking for CE for this presentation. Thank you very much for the time today. And if you've got a topic that you'd like information on or a presentation on, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you can reach out to just info@1031exchange or info@iraadvantage.net. Best of health to everyone. Hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye-bye.